What is the Vedic worldview on a father leaving a child to go follow passion, purpose, a calling? I have connected with the universal consciousness to go, and I've made that choice, but I hear words like abandonment, and it's causing doubt.
Yes, such a good question, because there's a wonderful example of somebody who did that we all, irrespective of what culture we're in, what religion we're in, or whatever, we all look up to this person who did exactly that. Buddha. Buddha was the crown prince of North India and was a famous young man. His proper name was Shakyamuni. Before that, when he was young, he was called Siddhartha Gautama Shakya. The Shakya clan of North India are still there. That family is there, like the Windsors, In those days, though, the royal family of North India was Shakya. And so young Siddhartha Shakya grew up in extreme comfort in a palace. His father, in particular, the king, wanted him only to be a king. And there had been a prediction that if he had ever seen suffering, that he would not follow the regal path, and he would become a great sage or a saint and teach people how to experience their dharma, their relevance. But his father was a fanatic, didn't want him to ever see suffering, and so he shielded him from it. And the boy, growing up, never saw anyone aging, even to the ridiculous extent that people in the palace who began aging were either exported out of the palace area or they had their hair dyed so that no white hair ever showed up. Anyone who got sick was taken out of view and whatnot. There was a young woman who was groomed to be his princess. He was the prince, she was the princess, and they were betrothed and then married. And then they had a child, a boy. And at some time in the boy's young life, the man who later on became known as Buddha, Siddhartha, went wandering outside the palace grounds at night, and there he saw it all. Suffering, sickness, disease, arguments, all the suffering on display in the villages outside the palace. And exactly what happened that the seer who had prophesied this, he decided he had to go. He had to go on a mission to find out what the cure for suffering was. And he left a note for his wife and son. His son couldn't read yet, but left a note anyway, and took off into the wilds. Now, there we have what, at this stage of the story, we're going to call it abandonment, because we're only looking at this part of it. From that year to this year, that comprises abandonment. And it looks like a negative thing happened and a very selfish behavior on behalf of this young father of a child and husband of a wife. But he ends up becoming the Buddha after a few years of exploring and arriving at his enlightenment, sitting under the Bodhi tree, nirvana. And then he's age 30. That happened when he was 30. And then he begins teaching. And about 5 years into his teaching, he'd become famous. The word trickled back to his wife and to his son, who was now much older. They didn't know that it was the father. They didn't know that the Siddhartha Gautama Shakya was the one who was being called the Shakyamuni, the Buddha. And they were curious, and like many, they made a pilgrimage to where he was. And there he sat on this particular day inside of a tent and they joined the queue and then went into the tent carrying a flower. Very often people would give him a flower and then he'd teach them something and then they would leave with a flower. We're very familiar with that in Vedic meditation. When his wife saw him, of course she recognized him immediately, even though his head was shaven. He was clean shaven everywhere and wearing a saffron robe. And the exchange was such that the wife and the son became his disciples. And now everybody was really happy with the fact that he had left. And they became well-known disciples of his, who also spread the knowledge that the Buddha was teaching. They spread the knowledge all over North India. His son became one of his most famous disciples. But that could never have happened if he stayed home. So now we take a larger chunk of time and look at this thing, and we don't call it the abandonment anymore. We call it the phase transition. He made a phase transition from being an unhappy father who just had to handle the suffering of the world to being somebody who could actually do something about it, and it was for the betterment of the family. And neither his wife nor his son, in the fullness of time, would ever have regretted the decision he made on that fateful night. So, what's the lesson in all of this? The giving of wisdom is the taking of content and taking content and putting it into context. Any good therapist does only that. Any good guru does only that. You come with content and we couch it in context, meaning with a large enough passage of time, we can see only evolution is at work. If we give ourselves only a narrow, constricted swath of time to look at, then almost everything looks horrible. Imagine if the only thing that anybody ever knew about you was an Instagram shot of you sitting on the toilet. And, you do that for a number of hours every week. And if that's all they got, that toilet sitting person who makes terrible smells and noises, and that's all you are. If you want something broader than that, you have to look at the whole picture. If we don't have the whole picture, then we can attribute non-evolutionary words to something. We have to have the whole picture. Couples will sometimes come to me, or one of a couple. It's usually one or other of a couple. We're getting divorced. We're breaking up. That word break up, I don't like that word. It's a phase transition happening. Oh, with this it's not going, she's not the one, or he's not the one. I thought that this, blah, 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 all that stuff. Boo-hoo, boo-hoo. And I always say, congratulations. And they look at me like, what? Don't you have any sympathy? Are you cold-hearted? What is this congratulations business? You've arrived at truth, and it's the truth of now. The truth of before was the truth of that state of consciousness that both of you were in. Now, evolution has taken you further, and new truths have been experienced, and you have to do something about it. And if you don't do something about it, the message is ignore the new truth that you have and live your life practicing ignoring it. For the sake of what? For the sake of maintaining a structure that's lost its relevance. The relevance of a relationship should be that of ever-increasing joy of shared experience. And for a period of time, every relationship yields that fruit. And that period of time might be 50 years, by the way. It may be 50 years, 60 years, 70 years it's yielding fruits. But it may also arrive at a point where it no longer yields fruits. And when it's failing to yield fruits, and if you've looked at all the reasons why, and still it's failing to yield the fruits for both of you, somebody has to be the change agent. One of you has to be the change agent. It's very rare that both people at the same time say, let's do something different, okay? Okay, good. I agree. You agree. Fantastic. Send me a postcard from wherever you go. It's very rare. It does happen, but it's very rare. Especially if there's children around. You have to figure out what to do with them. I said the other day in one of these podcasts that children are just like video cameras. They watch the parents, and children will always want to be peacekeepers. If this parent's angry and saying blah, blah, blah about that parent, the child will go, yeah, I agree. And that gives that parent ammunition. And then when they're with this parent's going, blah, 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 and they're going, yeah, I agree. And then the two parents meet, they go, you should hear what the kid says about you in your absence. You really upset the kid. And the kid is just like, I'm keeping peace with whoever's in the room. I'm not going to rock the boat. Children know how to avoid, they get good at avoiding conflict like this. So we cannot make children happy by agreeing to live an unhappy life. We can't make children happy by agreeing to live an unhappy life. So if there's something that needs to happen that's not happening in the structure of that relationship, then that relationship's going to have to get flexy. It's going to have to become adaptive. A relationship is a third thing. You have this person and that person, and the relationship is a third thing. 1 and 1 makes 3. And that relationship has to be like any organism. It has to be adaptive. All forms, all functions in any successful organism that survives, a successful organism survives because it produces forms and functions that are adaptive to change. A relationship also has to be adaptive to change. And if it's not, then the relationship can't survive in its current form. It has to be able to adapt and change as well. And so these things are all fraught. These are very touchy subjects for people, very, very touchy, because we're all convinced that I was just living my life and I was in love with somebody and then they started behaving like that. And they started living in the non-me way. They started thinking thoughts that were the non-me thoughts. They started behaving in the ways that are the non-me behaviors. How dare they? Ooh. Come on. There's no human being whose body and mind is designed to be the perfect vibratory match for another human being. That's a very hokey idea. There's a season of resonance, and I'll be the first to say the season could be your entire adult life. It's a great possibility, as rare as it is today. Very rare, but there's a season. Explore and enjoy the season. Explore it and enjoy it. If the season begins changing, don't get angry with the season. The season's changing. And when the season changes, we need to learn how to be adaptive and draw advantage from the change. So digging in our heels and saying, I won't change, I won't change. There were generations of Western society where people stayed together. And now I get to tell you a story about the couple in their 90s, which has been recorded before, so I hope people don't get too bored with it. The millions who are listening to this. Now, here he goes again on that old story. He must be getting old. But I just love telling this story. So you're going to hear it again if you've heard it before. Back in the 90s, I used to teach in a place just up the road in a little suburb called Willara at Jersey Road. And I was there for, 20 years or something. And somewhere in that 20 years, this elderly couple came to me and learned to meditate. And then they said, they were very elderly, in their 90s. And they said to me, we heard that you give private sessions. Is it true? And I said, yeah. And they said, well, we've learned to meditate. We love it. And we really like you and we trust you. Could we come to you in confidence and tell you something that's going on in our life? I said, absolutely. So they appeared one day and they sat down. He was about 93. She was about 91 from memory. And they said, we've been married for something like 75 years. We've been married for 75 years. Let's say that that's what it was. It was up there somewhere, since they were in their 20s. And we've decided we're getting divorced. And I said, really? How long have you been contemplating this? And they said, about 50 years. I said, you've been contemplating divorce for 50 years. Yes, we've talked about it a number of times, and we've decided that now's the time. We have a few years left, and we'd like to go our own ways and have other experiences. And I said, okay. What was the critical mass that caused you? And they said, well, it's a long story. We had a son. He was an only child. And he lived until he was 65. And then he died. And the only reason, and it was recent that he died, and the only reason why we're openly talking about divorce now is we waited for our son to die because we didn't want to upset him. And I said, what was the likelihood that over his 65 years of life, he never figured out that the two of you were having problems? Do you think it was likely that he just thought you were in a happy, jolly relationship when you were openly contemplating divorce for decades? I don't think so. They waited for their son to die before they decided to. And so, what's the moral of the story? If you've decided that your relationship is not yielding the fruits, you need to have a serious contemplation. Get the counseling and do all the rest of it. And if it works out that it's still yielding fruits as a result of that, fantastic. Fruits are back on the tree. But if you've done everything that you can and the fruits don't reappear on the tree, then be sweet and nice to each other and send postcards. There's you don't get extra points for living a life of suffering, and especially not for the child. The idea that we have a child and the child won't like it. I guarantee you the child knows that you're unhappy, and I guarantee you the child is just waiting for the two of you to get real. The children that I talk to all tell me that. Mommy and daddy, they've gone their separate ways. I'm so relieved. I was so relieved to see them snarling at each other or ignoring each other for all those years. Oh my God. When they finally found a way to get happy, fantastic. So don't blame it on the children and don't put weight on the children. If you like each other and you keep on liking each other and you look forward to seeing each other, stay together. If that's not true, challenge the assumption. So, Buddha.